Emily Van Hoff. My name is Emily Van Hoff, and I am an artist and designer in Chicago. You can find my work on Instagram at Emily Van Hoff or on my website, which is emilyvanhoff.com. I have been teaching these classes in partnership with the Fiskars and Michaels once a month all year. So this is our second to last class. So I'm very glad that you're here today. Today we are going to be making these quilted table runners. I will pay attention to the chat as we go. So if you have any questions or if I miss anything, I will keep an eye on that. If you have any questions specific to the Fiskars tools that I'm using, Tiffany is here. She's a representative from Fiskars and she can answer any of those questions. There is also a link to my blog post about this project in the chat. So if you miss anything, you need to go back. All of the measurements and everything are in there. And I will post a link to the recording of this class once it's available. So maybe keep that link handy as well. I think that's all of the preamble stuff. And we can dive in if you want to flip to the overhead camera. Here we go. Just a couple of details about this before we get started. As you can see, these are just 3 extra large half square triangle blocks. And you can kind of customize it by changing the size of the blocks, changing the number of the blocks. I did 3 for this table runner. The one I'm going to make today, I'm just going to do 2 so that it goes a little bit more quickly. Obviously, you can switch up colors, change for a contrasting binding. I think the back also looks really nice. It's just a solid color. You can choose like a coordinating color for there if you want. And then for the quilting, I'm doing just these really large embroidery floss hand quilted lines, which I think adds a really nice kind of handcrafted texture. But you could definitely do machine quilting, do a different quilting pattern. Lots of options there. So with that said, we can get into the making. The first step is going to be to cut out a couple of blocks. We're going to start with 14-inch squares. So lining things up on my cutting board here, my cutting mat rather. Aligning everything with the grid. It's 14 inches to start with. Using my clear acrylic ruler and my rotary cutter. And so that's 14 inches one way. And then we'll get 14 inches this way. So that's one block, and then using the other color, want to make sure all of your corners are nice square right angles. And since I'm making this just 2 blocks wide, I'm going to cut just one color or one square of each color. So that will make for a total of 2 blocks. If you're doing more finished squares than that, you'll want to cut 2 of each color. Okay, so we've got 2 blocks, 14 inches square each. I'm going to line those up on top of each other, perfectly aligned. And then we're going to cut them diagonally in half. Like that nicely from corner to corner. All right, so now we have 2 pieces with 1 color each, and we're going to sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance along this long diagonal side of both of the pieces. On the sewing machine in here a second. All right, so a 1/4 inch seam allowance along this long edge. Make sure your edges are staying nicely aligned as you go. And we'll do the same thing for the second triangle. If it helps you to keep them sort of aligned, you can also pin them in place. I prefer kind of just holding them together, making sure they stay aligned as they go. And then once you have those sewn together, we're going to iron your seam open. Someone was asking for sewing machine recommendations. If anyone has a favorite, feel free to put that in the chat. I use the Juki Exceed, which I really like. It's maybe more than you might need as like a beginner, but I really like mine. I just got it tuned up and it is running beautifully. All right, so iron these seams open on both of your blocks. You're doing more than 2 blocks. Obviously, iron all of them open. All right. So once you've ironed them open, we're gonna come in and just double check that everything is square and trim them down to 13.5 inch squares. Sometimes sewing pieces like this together on the bias can kind of warp your pieces a little bit. So I like to make sure that my diagonal is lined up on this 45-degree angle here. And then just trim it square. And the more precise you are in the cutting stages, the more sort of square your finished table runner will be. Well, it's good to be kind of precise with these steps. That is all nicely squared up. I have another one that I did earlier, so you don't have to watch me making two of them square. We're going to sew them together at this point. You can feel free to play around, pick out your favorite orientation. That's pretty cute for just two. This is how I did my other one. I might do mine this way since I'm just doing two. I think that's kind of fun. You're going to flip the one side over on top of the first side and line up your edges. And we're going to sew this seam together, again, using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. All right, once you got those sewn together, we're going to open it up and iron that seam open as well. So we've got the top layer of our table runner finished. And then the next step is to make kind of the quilt sandwich. We need our batting and our backing fabric. So again, I'm using the same color that I used on the front for the backing, but it would be pretty cute to use a coordinating color as well. And then I've got some warm and natural batting here. You can use whatever your batting preference is. And we're gonna lay the quilt top right side up on top of our batting. We're gonna cut it out just a little bit bigger. We'll cut it down to size after we've quilted it. So for this step, you can just leave it a couple inches larger all the way around. So we got the batting cut to size. What weight is the batting? I'm not sure. It's like whatever the standard warm and natural weight is. I think it's a fairly thin one. It's just for, since I'm using it for a table runner, I don't think it needs to be anything particularly heavy or fluffy. All right, so we're going to cut the backing fabric, same size as our batting. And then you'll want to make sure all of my layers are already ironed pretty flat, but you'll want to make sure that everything is ironed sort of as flat as you can get it. The fewer wrinkles you have, the easier the quilting step will be. Okay, so we got all our layers together here. Since this is a pretty small piece, I think it's fine just to sort of layer them, and I don't do any kind of taping down or anything for this size of piece. And I have my little safety pins. I'm gonna safety pin baste my layers together around 3 to 4 inches apart is probably ideal. And this step just kind of holds all your layers together so that they don't shift while you're doing the quilting step. I use, someone's asking why I use safety pins instead of straight pins. I use safety pins just because they're not going to fall off. They don't poke you while you're doing hand quilting. These particular safety pins, you know, you can see that they're also like bent a little bit, which we think makes everything just kind of lay flatter. It kind of dips down into your fabric. But I'm sure straight pins would also work just fine, especially for something of this size. And again, just about 3 or 4 inches apart. I'm kind of doing 3 rows here. Make sure you're kind of smoothing out any wrinkles as you go. This is definitely the annoying part, but it makes a difference when you just can have everything held in place and not have to worry about things shifting around while you're quilting. This is a new box of safety pins, but I've seen people recommend that after you use your safety pins, when you put them back in the box, to not close them, so that the next time you use them, you don't have to open them all. Can get a little bit painful on your fingers if you do a whole bunch of them. We're almost there. And the last one. Beautiful. Okay, so next step is going to be the quilting. I want my finished one back out again. On this one, I chose a variety of different colors. That kind of went with my scheme. I think that that's a fun way to bring a little bit more color into these pieces. So I've got a whole collection here of different colors of embroidery floss. I've got, let's see, sewing needle with a bit of a larger head so that I can fit my embroidery floss through there. And I measure out a piece of floss that's a little bit longer than the width of the table runner. Just tie a knot at the end, and then when I start a row, I make sure that it's like quite close to the end, to the edge of my fabric. Keep it about like maybe a 1/4 inch or a little bit shy of a 1/4 inch. See, this is a little bit bright. Yeah, I start it maybe just like shy of a 1/4 inch from the edge. That way, when you sew the binding on, all of your knots are going to be hidden sort of inside the binding at the edge of your piece. And I'm just going to kind of eyeball a straight line across here. You can, if you have a favorite way of marking your quilts, you can definitely do that. I'm going to use a hero marker or a chalk pen, or I don't know, I've got a knot. But I kind of like I kind of like to eyeball it because then it's a little bit wonky, and I think that adds a little something to the hand quilted nature of it. And I'm just going to do a straight, it's just like a really big running stitch all the way across. Let's see, maybe I can pull this down a little bit. I definitely recommend a thimble for this part. I don't know where my thimble is at the moment, but it's definitely more friendly on your fingers. Ooh, this line is going to be very wonky. Paying attention to too many things at once. That's all right. You get the general idea anyway. Someone's asking for what tips I have for keeping them straight since I'm not marking lines. I'm really just eyeballing it and clearly not doing a very good job of keeping it straight. That's up to, yeah, that's totally up to you. If you want to make sure your lines are perfectly straight, my preference is a hero marker or something of the sort. I actually don't have a hero marker, and I use a butter knife that is not serrated. And that just kind of creases your fabric to give you a line to follow. So that's a great option. I've used like blue painter's tape before, which also works well. We'll see how well I do with no markings. So far I give myself a B-. This is maybe not the most fun to watch, but it's one of my favorite parts to do. I like to put on some trashy TV or something and sit on the couch and do some hand quilting. Someone asked what surface I have under my cutting mat. I have a second cutting mat under this one. It's a little bit bigger, which is depending on how large I'm working. I like my cutting mat to be kind of similarly sized to my project. Right. And I am definitely not going to quilt this whole thing while you watch. I'm just going to do one line here and then move on to the binding. But on my finished one, I have my quilting lines about 1 inch apart, which I think looks nice. You could do more or less, do them in a different pattern. Anne is asking about like my own personal art that I make. Most of the wall hangings that I make are machine quilted. I do have a few pieces that are hand quilted, but mostly smaller ones. They're just so time intensive that kind of can't sell them for as long as it would take. I do love hand quilting. I try to get a little bit of hand quilting mixed in with my stuff when I can. Kathy's asking how long it would take to hand quilt a full-length finished table runner. That is a very good question. I did not time myself. I'm not sure. I guess you could time yourself for 1 row and then multiply that by how many rows there are. How long did this just take me? Maybe like, let's see, what time is it? Maybe it took me like 5 minutes. So maybe like 8 minutes for a longer one times, how many lines did I do on this one? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Whatever 8 minutes times 14 is, I cannot do fast math under pressure. Okay, so I ended here close to the edge, and then I'm tying my knot on the back. And to tie a knot, I just take, let's see, I just take like a tiny bit of fabric, like so, pull my needle through, and then put my needle back through this loop and pull it tight. And then I do like 2 of those to make sure it's snug and in place. And then I like to hide my tail, so I just kind of put it between the 2 layers, kind of along the edge like that, pull it through, and then I can trim here, I'm just nice and close to the edge. Someone is asking if I usually begin my first quilted row near the middle or if I vary where I begin. I think on these, I do tend to start towards the middle on something like this and kind of like work both ways out to the edge. I'm not sure why. I don't know if there's any rhyme or reason to it. Okay, so straight-ish. My line is straight-ish. We're gonna call it good enough. I think, you know, if you have a bunch of rows that are all kind of straight-ish, I think it looks nice, but you could definitely mark your line and make it more straight. Okay, so you're gonna quilt the whole thing. I'm just gonna do this one line to save some time. Someone's asking about the kind of quilting thread that I use. I sort of switch it up. I do, if I want kind of like big quilting that's visible, I use embroidery floss. Otherwise, I'll use a bit of just a thicker, like, yeah, a quilting thread or a standard machine quilting thread. For this step, I'm now just trimming my batting and my backing to be the same size as my quilt. So just cutting right along the edge of the top layer here. And we'll do that all the way around. Probably also use your rotary cutter for this. Yeah, someone's asking why I'm trimming with a regular scissors instead of a rotary blade. No reason particularly. I think for a larger quilt, I would do a rotary blade. This is small enough that a scissors seems just as fast. All right. We are trimmed to size. And the next step is going to be binding. And if you have a favorite way to bind your quilts, go ahead and do it however you prefer. The method I'm going to show is kind of like the one that's most straightforward to my brain, and like probably easiest to explain for beginners in the limited time that we have. But yeah, as I said, feel free to do it whichever way you prefer. So I'm starting with a piece of fabric that's a little bit wider than my longest side. And we're going to cut 2.5-inch strips. And I'm folding it in half just to make it a little bit less long, but make sure your edges are lined up nicely on top of each other. And we will trim 2.5 inches. I'm going to do 2 that are the same length as my long edges. And we'll need 2 for the short edges, which we'll just do 1 of these and cut that in half. We got 2 shorter pieces and 2 longer ones. Also, once you've quilted all of this, take your safety pins out. I'm going to leave them in for now just because I didn't finish that step. We're going to iron all of these in half lengthwise. do a short one. Okay, so once you have them ironed in half, I'm going to start with the short edge. And I'm going to align it. Let's see. Okay, so it's folded this way. So this side here is my cut edge. I'm going to align that here along the edge, one of the short edges of my quilt. You can pin that in place. And my pins here. You certainly could use this for a larger quilt. This, someone is asking if this is the binding method that I would use for a larger quilt as well. You certainly could. I do find this method to be like a little bit bulkier, which I think is nice for a table runner, maybe a little bit less nice for a quilt. But there's a ton of ways you can bind your quilt on the internet. It has great instructions on all of them. So if you want a less bulky option, you can look that up as well. Okay, so once we've got this pinned in place, we're gonna sew along this edge. I am using a 5/16 seam allowance, which sounds very annoying, but it's right between a quarter and 3/8. Yes, between a quarter and 3/8. And I find that to be like nicely proportional for the size of quilt. And it's also happens to be the seam allowance for the foot that I'm using. If I have my needle position in the center and then align the edge of my fabric along the edge of my foot, that is the length that I'm using there. Otherwise, I'm just between a quarter and 3/8. Okay, so once we've got that sewn on, we're gonna iron this piece flat first, like so. So that's just this whole piece flipped over along the seam allowance. And then we'll flip it over and fold down along the edge of your fabric. And that should be, with this width of binding, that will cover your stitched line that you just made on the back. I will show you that close up here in a second. Right, so we've just kind of like wrapped this around. And since we folded it before sewing it, this is like a nice clean edge here. And that's kind of what makes it bulky, is because we've got 2 layers all the way around, but I think it works just fine for a table runner. It makes things sort of nice and even easily. So next step is going to be to stitch the binding down on the back side. I love hand stitching, as I'm sure you've picked up on by now. So I like to hand stitch that piece down. We'll grab a needle and thread here. Tie a knot in the end. I'm using just one thickness. I'm going to pin this in place. I think that'll make it a little easier to show you. All right, so we're going to hand stitch. Okay, make this a little closer. So to hand stitch the binding down, I keep my needle or my thread primarily like under the quilt. Let's see, how do I explain this? So I just have taken one little piece, kind of hard to show on camera, but I've just taken one like tiny bite sort of the binding, and then I go under inside the quilt layers and then back up through my binding and just kind of grab a little piece of the very edge of that binding fabric. And then just do that all the way down. Stitches are probably about, I don't know, a little less than 1/4 inch long or so. So as you can see there, you don't see too much of your thread. It's just kind of a nice clean finish for the back. Again, it's probably nice to have a thimble for this step. I don't know where mine is. I need to get a new one. And like I said, feel free, if you have other ways you like to bind your quilt, do that. Almost to the other side. Make my stitches like a little bit bigger now, just to, so you don't have to watch me for so long. All right, and then once you get to the other side, tie your thread off the same way we did before. And just sew through a little piece of fabric and then put your needle back through the loop. And do that maybe like twice, 2 or 3 times. And then I like to hide my thread. So we finished binding one side. Nice and clean on the front. Nice and clean on the back. You're probably gonna have like a little bit, this edge will be a little bit longer. You can just trim that off to be the same width as your quilt. Yeah, someone is asking about how I'm gonna do the corners. Again, this method that I'm doing is just kind of the most like straightforward to explain. Obviously, there's a lot of ways you can do the corners. This way kind of hurts my brain the least. So I think it's easiest to explain. You can definitely do a mitered corner option as well, but I'm not going to be doing that today. So for this edge, again, taking one of the long pieces, laying that along the long edge of the quilt, like the cut edges of the fabric aligned with the edge, the fold will be here on the inside. And then for this edge, also, you're gonna wanna do both short edges first. I'm gonna skip the other short edge just for the sake of time. But you'll do both short ends first, and then move on to the long ends. And for the long ends, you'll want both sides to kind of extend past a little bit, about an inch or so. So I got that on both sides. And then again, we're gonna stitch with my weird seam allowance between 1/4 and 3/8, just a little bit larger than 1/4 along this side. So I will do that right now. Okay, so we got this sewn on and we're going to do the same thing, first ironing it up and then ironing it around to the back. Someone's asking about a class on different ways to bind off. I won't be doing that. but there are definitely a lot of tutorials online. A great place to look. You can look through the Michaels classes, see if they have anything there. I'm not sure. Otherwise, I know Susie Quilts on Instagram. She has a great quilting blog with tutorials for all of the things. I'm sure she's got some binding blogs and videos on there as well. Okay, so I ironed it flat. Now we're ironing, folding it over to the back and ironing. Okay, so we've got it folded over, and then we've got this like a little bit of fabric sticking out the end here. And we're going to hand stitch it down and kind of fold in the corner a bit. So I'm going to trim it to be probably extending about a ½ inch. And then we're going to open up your fold, kind of fold that end piece in, and then fold this back down again. I don't know how well you can see that. I can do that again. So we're going to fold the end piece in so it kind of aligns with this short edge, and then fold that top back down into place. And then we will hand stitch that in there. Where'd my needle go? Okay. Someone is asking about how to keep your hands and wrists healthy while you do so many repetitive things. And that is an excellent question, and one that I worry about a lot. I don't have a good answer. I do have some like wrist braces that I'll sometimes wear at night, or like a wrist compression thing. And I do think that those help. I don't think they're like a full solution, but definitely if you do a lot of tedious, repetitive things, a good thing to think about. I have no answers though. Okay, so I've got this folded in, and then we're just gonna kind of hand stitch it in place. And then finish stitching down the rest of our binding the way we did that short end. And I'll just get that started a little bit so you can see the corner. All right, so that's how our corner is going to look finished. Again, like I said, there's a million ways to bind your quilt. This is the one I think is easiest to explain, but feel free to explore and find other ways as well if you prefer other ways. Yeah, I think that that's probably as far as I'm going to go, because otherwise you'll just be watching me do a lot of hand binding. So I think if anyone has any questions, throw those in the chat now. I can show you, get another look. Oh, why this light is reflecting off of here so much. Turn that down a little. Oops. Oops. Okay. So here's what my corners look like. And again, you'll do the 2 short sides first and then the 2 long sides second to finish all of your corners. And wait a second to see if anyone has any more questions. Next month will be, I forgot to pull them out, but next month is going to be some reusable fabric gift wrap things. I'll go through a couple of ways to do binding on the edge of those, and also some fabric painting on them. So that will be fun. Let's see. Someone asked a question about my iron setup. I have a wool pressing mat that's like, I don't know, I think it's over a ½ inch thick. So the heat really doesn't get through the pressing mat onto my table. And I don't use steam on it. I think if you use steam, which I don't think you're supposed to do on a wool pressing mat, that might get through, but just the heat doesn't. Let's see. Now there's the link in there to sign up for next month's class, which will actually be my last class. So you should all come to that. That would be very fun. All right, I'm not seeing any more questions. So thanks everyone for showing up. And oh, maybe another question. Can you do the hand stitching after the binding? I assume you mean the quilting part. I suppose that you could. That would be fine probably on this size of a piece. I think the quilting kind of holds everything together a little bit better for the binding. That's probably smarter to do the quilting lines first and the binding second, but you probably could do it the other way around if you wanted to on this size of a project. Cool. Have a really great night, everyone. And thanks again for coming.